Hey folks, you're about to watch the Filmcast review of Avatar, which we made to celebrate its recent re-release. This is part of a longer conversation that we had about Avatar on the Filmcast podcast. To get that conversation, go to thefilmcast.com. We'll also leave a link in the description below. Enjoy. You're listening to the Filmcast. Find us at thefilmcast.com or at youtube.com/filmcast. That was a trailer for Avatar, and the plot summary of Avatar is as follows, according to IMDb. A paraplegic Marine dispatched to the moon Pandora on a unique mission becomes torn between following his orders and protecting the world he feels is his home. We all saw this movie this week in theaters, right? I saw it in Laser IMAX 3D. Devindra, what format did you see it in?
I wish I saw it in Laser IMAX 3D. I saw it in RPX, which is Regal's like big screen formats. It's big. It's nice.
Interesting. Jeff Kanata, how about you?
I saw it in IMAX 3D as well. I believe it was laser, but I'm not entirely certain.
All right. So,
it was
a
great projector.
Yeah, you know what, Jeff? Usually I go to you second, but let's just start with you today. Overall, what did you think of watching Avatar again?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I thought of seeing Avatar again is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
All right, Avatar limerick, hit me.
Jake Augustine and Neytiri are astounding in IMAX 3D. Even if the culture can't recall them for sure, they're relevant always to me.
Oh, that's sweet, Jeff.
Totally.
Also, wow, writing 3D with Neytiri, man. That's
not his name. Was that on purpose?
Wait, what are you talking about?
You said Jake Augustine.
No, Jake, comma Augustine. Dr. Augustine.
Grace Augustine.
Yeah.
Three characters.
Like,
yeah.
Jigsaw. It's hard to have commas in limericks, okay? It's hard to have commas in limericks.
It is.
Yeah.
True.
Jake, Grace, and Neytiri didn't work.
That I would understand. Yeah.
All right. So what was the experience of watching this in IMAX 3D?
There is a moment at the beginning of this movie. It's not the first shot, but it's close. With that drop of water, you see Jake's face in the cryo chamber, and that drop of water hovering out there in space. From that moment, I was absolutely transported into this world. And I mean, 5 minutes in, I was like, I forgot how much I love this. And what a treat it is to see it on a massive screen with great projection and incredible sound. It is, I mean, I said this in an earlier part of the episode. It is not like any other film. I know plot-wise and structurally, a lot of people point out how it is so similar to other movies. I won't dispute that. But the experience of watching Avatar is unrivaled to me. It is unmatched. And man, I could not believe how well it held up technologically. A movie that is so dependent on CG, and CG is so iterative and has improved, so much in the intervening 12 years since this movie came out. The fact that I was still connecting to these characters. We talk so much about how many big superhero films and how many big action movies and summer blockbusters end with this one CG character pummeling another CG character. And it's like, oh my gosh, we just leave the confines of the movie and now we're just in an animated movie with pummeling each other. I never felt while watching this movie at any point that I wasn't just watching characters being filmed. I was always engaged with the characters. I never felt like, oh, that's CG. I mean, obviously it's CG, but it doesn't remind me. And that is a quality of the filmmaking, right? The filmmaking is so high level here. The action set pieces, the slower moments, the way that the camera moves, the way the frame is always alive with a million things to see and notice, and how the world is just teeming with detail. And I mean, the world building's extraordinary. the look and feel of, even when you're just hanging out with the humans, the look and feel of the world and how all of the technology in their laboratories works, and how, you know, the color palette and how the masks work and the big robots, and all of it is just, I want to watch this. I want to be there. I don't want this 3-hour movie to end. And I saw this, I think 4 or 5 times in theaters in 2009. I would always take new people and go see it again. That is very unlike me. I don't watch multiple times in the movie theaters as a general rule. Every time I saw it in 2009, I cried. I cried this time watching it. I think this movie lands on me in an emotional way. I am connected. I think Zoe Saldana's performance is one of the most underrated film performances of all time. It is extraordinary. What she did under, you know, however many pounds of film equipment, of camera equipment strapped to her head, it is an incredibly evocative performance. Powerful. I'm in love with that character. I see her, you know, feel the death of characters and the love she feels. I mean, all of it is, I'm connected with this world. I'm connected with these characters. The thrill ride is unmatched to me. And the way the action sequences play out, the way the 3D is utilized to be sort of inward drawing, instead of, you know, so much of 3D up to the release of Avatar had been like, there's a pointy thing coming right at your face. You know, it was like, oh, it was always coming out. And Cameron's vision to say, hey, no, draw you into the image, see the depth of it. I remember thinking this in 2009, but I hadn't thought of it in, you know, a decade or more. I love how there's a couple of shots in the movie where you see photos, like Polaroids almost, like stuck to the wall. And those have 3D in them.
I think those were meant to be lenticular kind of image, like
brilliant.
holographic photos. Yeah.
I love that stuff, but it's always, not always, but most of the time it's drawing you in, or how there's there's things in front of the frame, you know, in the foreground of the frame, in the background of the frame. And so there's always layers and levels, and you're peering into this world that seems to unveil itself on the screen. I mean, I unabashedly love this movie for all its flaws, which we have enumerated earlier in the show. And flaws I see them. I recognize the flaws in the movie. I recognize that it is, you know, it's not the most original tale. I recognize that it has, you know, very problematic themes. But for me, it will always be one of my favorite movie experiences, despite all that stuff. And because it provides a cinematic experience, pure cinema, this feeling of watching it on a giant screen with the images engulfing me, there is nothing that compares to it, even 12 years later. I love this movie.
Devindra Ardor, curious what you thought of the tech of the movie and the overall experience of watching it.
Sure. I mean, I'm glad you still love the movie, Jeff. Like, I want everybody who liked this thing to continue liking it. I just want to ask other questions too at the same time. I think the tech is interesting because Cameron did it. I don't think he remastered the CG, but adding high frame rate to certain scenes, especially like fast motion scenes, if the camera is like whipping back and forth, that does help to make it seem more clear. Certainly clearer than was like when it was originally released. So I think that's cool. And the fact that we're not really even talking about it is kind of interesting because he has talked about this before. You know, we've seen the Hobbit movies. I've seen movies like Gemini Man and, you know, the other Ang Lee stuff that dabbled with a high frame rate. It is a weird party trick, but to blend it into a movie that is doing the normal stuff and then get a little bit of high frame rate in there is kind of interesting. I thought that was really cool. But I do feel like revisiting this movie reminded me, first of all, that, you know, yeah, it's an incredible experience. It just kept also reminding me like, man, I love James Cameron so much. I wish he just pushed a little harder. just a little harder in the storytelling in terms of like what this movie was actually about. It's almost 3 hours long, but it does feel like it takes its time, just not telling us very much, or at least it feels like this is one from the heart for him. Like we know him. He is a nature lover. He is a guy who's always out in the ocean. I'm sure if he was in Jake Sully's shoes, he would do everything Jake Sully did. Jake Sully seems like his avatar. And I feel like that is a weakness of the movie. Maybe like he is just way too into like this particular version of himself. But hey, the movie's beautiful. I think it's a great experience. And I've been trying to tell people to go see this in theaters because you're not just gonna get a Blu-ray and watch this at home. Like that's not Avatar. That's like half of Avatar. The full Avatar experience is being in there in a giant screen and good 3D and as bright as possible and maybe enjoying it with a crowd too. Like this is a true crowd pleaser. It's also notable that this is an original movie when so many things are original to a point. But this was an original movie that came about right when the MCU starts to take off. And it's really fascinating to look at our culture now and just be like, man, Marvel just really did dominate everything. And then now it's Marvel plus Star Wars because Disney is just a behemoth at this stuff. Like they just really own this stuff. So to
Now they
what
own
you were
Avatar.
saying, to what you were saying, Dave, like I do think the idea that Avatar is kind of its own thing and that maybe didn't blow up as much is probably a bit of a feature. That's certainly
It's a pleasant throwback to days when not everything
throwback.
needed to be a franchise, right?
It's kind of, it was immediately a franchise. He announced sequels the next year, but it was
but
the fact
they
that
didn't happen. It didn't actually become a franchise.
Like he kept talking about it for a decade. It was a planned franchise, but I think it's kind of a happy accident that Avatar kind of ended up being this thing while the whole cinematic environment just like blew up and got far geekier and far more into geek properties than even probably James Cameron could have predicted. So I enjoyed watching this in theaters, but man, watching it again is like it'll probably be another 10 years or so before I watch this movie again because I would want to see it in theaters, and also it's too long. I think it's too long. I feel like it could have been tightened up a bit to really focus on the good stuff and the broader themes, because like there's a lot of great stuff here. I think Zoe Saldana again, fantastic. Totally agree with you, Jeff. Stephen Lang. I feel like this movie reintroduced badass Stephen Lang to a lot of people, and that scene where they're escaping the military facility and Stephen Lang just goes out without his mask and just like
so badass.
Unloads on him, and then like his assault rifle's done, just keeps shooting with his pistol, and then 20 seconds later the guy's like, you need oxygen. He's like, yeah. Oxygen.
He's one of the great film villains of all time, I think. I mean, truly awesome.
He is
him and Zoe Saldana are the MVPs of this movie for me.
Certainly not Sam
They're
the
two most memorable characters for me.
Certainly not Sam Worthington. Like also rewatching this, I'm like, man, we really put a lot on Sam Worthington. He tries his best. But oh man, he, especially watching it right now, like he really feels like he falls in line with so many of the other like dudes who are trying to lead action movies in that era. I've seen him in other things. He's in one of the Hulu series I've been watching. So he is
Under the Banner of Heaven, right?
Under the Banner of Heaven. Yeah,
he's pretty good in that, I think.
He has matured quite a bit. I feel like he's aged into his face better and he's just a more experienced actor now. But here in this movie, it's like, he feels so green. I guess maybe this character should feel pretty green, but it didn't really connect with me
more
as
blue
much.
than green.
Do you want to say Michelle Rodriguez? Ton of fun.
Total badass.
Total badass. Yeah. Love her so much. Still don't have any idea what Giovanni Ribisi is doing in this movie. A lot of odd choices. But I was once again happy to hear CCH Pounder, in a role like this, in a big budget movie. CCH Pounder is one of the few Guyanese actors working in Hollywood right now. So I will support her forever. More power to her.
She's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great experience in theaters, but it did make me think more about like what I wanted from this movie and the things that were missing from it.
I had an incredible time at the theater, completely blown away. I think because probably when I saw it first, there was no such thing as laser IMAX. Like I don't think.
Laser IMAX is great. Any laser projection, good shit.
I was like, this is mind blowing. And Jeff, your reaction, on the podcast, if you listen to the whole thing at thefilmcast.com, you will hear me speak forcefully about why I think this movie is deeply, deeply troubling in its themes. At the same time, I had such a freaking good time at the theater. And also, you said like I got done watching the movie, and I was like, they could play it again, and I'm thinking of going to see it again, even though I just saw it like 2 nights ago in theaters. It's like that good, that much of a ride, right?
And it's also so rare that we're going to have an opportunity to see it in the format that it is most suited for.
I have heard tell there will be double features with Avatar: The Way of Water, so that might be another opportunity when The Way of Water comes out to go to revisit Avatar. So technologically, it's incredible. From a sound perspective, it's the CG holds up. It probably at the time it was good. They probably gave it a nice coat of paint for this thing, but like at the time it looked good. Today it looks good. It was way ahead of its time, and I think they showed a scene from The Way of Water in the post credits, and Devindra, you were talking about how it's better. I agree, it's better. Like the 3D technology is better. It's the CG looks better, but it's not like that much better. That like I didn't think it was like a huge evolutionary leap. It's like
there's kind of more the shots he was allowed to do. Like it is more freeing because it's about a character basically riding a whale like creature, and there are incredible shots of him underwater, like looking up at the sun and the whale. I just feel like cameras may be a little more free with this stuff.
Did you guys see a scene with them running a whale at the end?
I don't remember a whale, Devindra. I have to put.
Oh no, they were just swimming. It was a bunch of kids swimming.
Yeah, it was a bunch of kids.
Oh,
you saw a whale?
I saw a whale.
There was a whale in the teaser trailer. Are you sure you're not getting that mixed up, Devindra?
Yeah, I know. I mean, what do you mean? I did see the other teaser trailer. So what I saw was the credits rolled, and then like maybe a minute after we saw some credits, so like a preview.
And now for a look at what's next.
Yeah.
It was something.
I did not.
What's coming?
Did not see a bunch of kids. I saw one kid. That's interesting. I didn't hear about multiple scenes. But I saw one kid, which I think may be Jake and Neytiri's son, maybe, or child, on the back of this giant whale-like creature. And
my gosh! Wow, we must have seen different scenes then. I saw the same scene that
there's so much about this movie in this re-release that I don't think they really publicized. So that's cool.
Fascinating.
Okay, he was on the whale.
Yeah. Well, in any case, I think it looked better, but it wasn't like.
Did you have a lot of water?
It was honestly there's nothing really happened. It was an incredible scene to put at the end of the movie because it was just like, look how gorgeous this movie's gonna look.
It seemed like it was just like a random, like 60 seconds. There's no plot arc to it or anything. It was just like a random.
It's just kids swimming in the gorgeous water in 3D.
Showing off the water. And I think the water effects look incredible. Like we have never seen water like this in movies.
They're good. They're good. But the other thing that really impressed me about the movie was just James Cameron's classical filmmaking style, and that's what was accomplished. Like the idea, for those who don't know, basically they used this kind of space where he could have like a camera film the actors, and then like on the monitor you can see kind of a rough version of what Pandora looks like, if I'm not mistaken. Like that's how they filmed it.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I think, plus James Cameron's tendencies, it's very much put together like a conventional. It's shot like a conventional movie, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it feels like the camera has a weight to it. There's a lot of like handheld camera in the movie. Most of the shots are kind of medium wide, like you're pretty far away. You can understand what's going on. At multiple points, James Cameron likes using slow motion, and like he uses a lot in like The Abyss and Terminator 2. And at multiple points in the movie, the action slows down so you can understand what's going on, and it's like. What a concept. Amazing to have like coherent action filmmaking.
Old school, whereas now too many drone shots, people. I want fewer drone shots in some of your movies, maybe.
Yeah, but like
you compare that last sequence with Quaritch in the mech versus Neytiri on the back of the Panther thing. Like compare that to the end of, I don't know, any Marvel movie, right?
Black Panther maybe like has similar creatures, yeah.
Well, or the Hulk pummeling something, or these two big CG, any superhero movie. I never felt like I was watching just two CG things, like two toys. It had logic and flow and beats and emotion and like like you're saying, classical action filmmaking just done in a digital style. So it doesn't, you don't feel like it's digital. You don't feel like, oh, we've transitioned into the CG portion of the show now.
I think the biggest risk for like an all CG environment is often the camera feels weightless, or it's doing something that's physically impossible for a camera to do.
Which
like
is what they're trying to do with drone shots. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they're trying to simulate it with stuff like drone shots. So I was really impressed with the filmmaking. I will say that some of the dialogue is pretty rough, and particularly like earlier on in the movie, I thought like, ooh, like a lot of this is clunky.
The whole opening sequence, something blew a hole in my life. Worthington plus that dialogue.
That is at least somewhat poetic, Devindra. I mean, there's stuff like unobtainium. A lot of people complained at the time about the idea is that Awa is Mother Nature, but it's like it's not enough for it to be Mother Nature. It's literally a neural network. Some people think that that's making something physical that should be metaphorical and
loading data into the neural network.
You're loading data, and it's like, okay, like that doesn't really bother me that much, but I understand why people are bothered by it, because I think James Cameron is just like a very literal filmmaker. Like instead of making it subtext, we're just going to literally make it text.
I'm excited for Way of Water because his co-writer is Josh Friedman, who did the Sarah Marshall Chronicles, which was an amazing TV show.
Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Sarah Connor, not Sarah Marshall, but Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall Chronicles was really good.
I would also watch that. But yeah, he is a writer who is capable of managing up a whole bunch of themes. So I'm interested in seeing like how Cameron upgrades the storytelling, with the sequels.
Yeah. Well, folks, I was thinking of like walking through each section of the movie, but I don't think we actually have time for that tonight.
But I got to tell you, Dave, earlier today, I was telling a friend of mine that we were going to do this, and I've been like, we've been talking about this movie for literally, a decade and arguing about it for close to that. And we're finally going to actually talk about the movie in earnest and kind of hash this all out. And I don't know what to expect from my co-hosts. And she said to me, she goes, so you're just trying to get their approval. So you're saying their approval is like unobtainium. I thought that was very good.
Which is a real thing, and then people still complain about it. But
I mean, that's the thing. Jeff, can you acknowledge that unobtainium is a patently silly name for a mineral that they're getting?
If it's a real
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
And so the first part of the movie where like you're introduced to unobtainium, whatever Giovanni Ribisi's doing in this movie, like
I like his performance. He's just playing a smarmy smarm. Like he's doing a good job of playing smarmy smarm.
Smarmy smarm. But him explaining unobtainium to the doctor, pretty sure she knows what's up.
It's kind of like Vince Gilligan, who wrote Breaking Bad and Much a Better Call Saul, is like two brothers don't sit down and at a diner and be like, how long have we been brothers? There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on in the first act of this movie, where it's like people are just saying a bunch of stuff to each other that I don't know that they would necessarily say. Here's a thing that really stuck out to me like a sore thumb this watch was Joel David Moore's performance as Dr. Norm Spellman, which I was just it was even more over the top than I remember. Like when they're going to the Misty Mountains and he's like, yes, he's like kind of
very
like
strange.
The nerd surrogate,
super nerd,
the nerd viewer surrogate in the movie.
But also I feel for him, man, because Jake Sully sucks. Where'd this guy come from? Did no training? Just coming in here into his dead twin brother's avatar. Super convenient. The whole setup for this movie is like he's a former soldier. He's a quadriplegic person. His brother is dead. This is so much. I feel like they could have simplified some of that storytelling because the brother doesn't.
What's interesting? I think what Jeff's about to point out, but like what's interesting is like every one of those plot points allows them to create a character dynamic in the movie, right? Like he's a paraplegic, so that means that like having the avatar body is like something that he would definitely be attracted to because he could regain his limbs back, which is something we know the character wants.
Sure.
And the fact that he's like coming in for his brother means like everyone else can like not like him, and like that can create some tension. I don't think they really do that much with it, to be honest. Like
they do. It's just a thing.
At one point in the diary he's making, he says, Well, I guess Norm is like way more on board now than he was before. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess that's solved.
This movie is almost 3 hours long and doesn't build their relationship. Norm hates him, rightfully, because like, who is this guy? Who said he comes in and pretends to be a warrior? Now he's all up with the Na'vi. That's just he's cheating. He's cheating.
I do think Jake Sully is basically the Gordon Freeman.
Oh, absolutely.
Of this movie, right? Like he is this kind of blank slate on which you can project. Gordon Freeman from the Half-Life video games.
Yeah.
He is the blank slate on which you can project
the
your own desires and feelings, right? In that scenario, you'd be like,
the great thing about Gordon Freeman doesn't talk. No lines. No lines. You're fully the avatar. He is your avatar in that world. But Jake Sully kind of sucks, guys. Like he basically was instrumental to the entire destruction of Home Tree, and it wasn't until like the very end where he's like, "Huh, maybe this was bad.
I've made a huge tiny mistake.
Maybe I should have warned these people that I
love that line where he's."
Like.
Yeah. I love that line where he's like, "Well, we can go back and save them," and I think it's Spellman who's like, "Why would they trust us at all for anything? Why do they want us there at all?"
Yeah.
It's all your fault, Jake Sully, to a certain degree. He gave them the schematics.
He gave them the schematic. That's the bad thing, is he gave them the schematics, right? Like that's the unforgivable thing that he did. And like he doesn't even tell that to Neytiri, I don't think.
Doesn't tell that to her. There are so many opportunities over the course of this entire movie when they were having their little like relationship building where you can be like, I got something to tell you. I'm just feeling a little guilty about kind of gave them, have you ever seen Star Wars? Where that core of the Death Star.
It must be pointed out that I don't think that their plan would have been any different if they didn't have the schematics, right? Like, let's just shoot missiles at it. Was pretty much
shoot missiles at the point.
They knew where to shoot the missiles. You see, like I think specific points were destroyed even at the end because James Cameron is too technical of a director not to pay off that setup. Yeah.
I will say I really enjoyed that part when he kind of has to confess to her, and it really reminded me of She's All That. Remember, it's like when I took on this, it was a bet at first, but now it became something more.
After I Made Love to You and basically became your husband, your spouse for life, basically. Yeah,
I will say the motion capture was extremely impressive on Neytiri throughout.
Yes.
I thought it was okay on Jake Sully, but honestly, I was most impressed in that scene when he is confessing everything, and he's like, the reason I'm here is to tell you that this attack is going to come. And Sute says, like, you mated with this person, like, and his facial expressions throughout that whole scene are so incredible because he's obviously filled with rage, but he's also like wounded because Neytiri has fallen in love with this guy who he hates, and like there's all these emotions going across Sute's face. I'm like, I really believe that's a character.
And then at the end of the movie, Sute's like, "Yes, Jake Sully, I will die for you in this battle that you have caused." Goddamn idiot. Jake Sully.
Okay, but sorry, Jeff, what were you going to say? And then I want to talk about like the final two big sequences before we.
No, I was just going to point out how amazing Zoe Saldana's performance in that moment specifically is. Like when she realizes. And she tells him to leave, and she's incredible in this movie.
She's
the eye work. I remember the motion capture rigs did a great job of like capturing how eyes expressed, and that really shows up in that scene. I also kind of have a sense that Cameron and the animators just paid a lot of attention to Zoe Saldana's character, like a lot of attention there.
I mean, at times it's photorealistic to me. It's like I literally indistinguishable from reality. Also, like skin, the way skin works, the way like Jake Sully sweats and his like skin glistens. It's all very, very convincing. Technologically, the movie's incredible. Yeah. I would say the movie really builds to two big moments, right? Like one is the destruction of Home Tree is kind of the first major action sequence. And it's really, really gutting and upsetting, I have to say, like watching it again. And there's so many amazing moments within the broader sequence, like when they hit all the load-bearing columns and like the tree starts like splintering into like a gajillion pieces. It's like it's actually almost pornographic in terms of like the destruction, right? Like it feels.
I'm not sure what you're into, Dave, but
Look up the definition of pornographic. It's not what you think it is. But it really is. It feels like when
I'll
we
just
watch
Google pornographic and see what happens.
when you watch like a mass destruction event in real life, it feels like that trouble. Like I'm not going to compare it to real life tragedies, but you know what they are like. It feels that kind of upsetting. And then there's that moment when like they're tied up, and then like Neytiri goes and kind of gives them a look before she kind of like runs away, and it's just like
you're on your own.
yeah, it's like you're on your like F it, like you're on your own. There's so many amazing moments in that thing, and then also juxtaposed with how cavalier Quaritch is doing everything. He's like, launch, drinking coffee, launch everything.
So
first round's on me when we get back. Like just the separation between. It's really an anti-military movie in many ways, right?
Oh, very much so. That shot that's sort of behind him in the cockpit with the arrows hitting the cockpit and like leaving little scratches on the. It's so good. He's just like completely unfazed. He's like, well, I guess we're gonna have to light him up. It's like it's so evocative. You just feel like, man, fuck this guy.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, I guess like this is the thing that's so sort of weird. Is like I think the movie is like anti-military, but it's theoretically also like anti-war. I think in some ways, which is kind of what makes the final sequence really weird because it's so freaking thrilling. Like the entire last 45 minutes of the movie is incredible. Just
you're watching like, revolution in action too. Like it's clearly an Iraq War allegory. So that's kids watching this movie today will probably have no idea what any of this means. But
shock and awe is name check.
Right, shock and awe is name check. And there's so many sequences like there's an incredible visual. I'm like, wow, if a movie had one of these, like if a movie was building up to this one visual, it would be. We'd think that movie is amazing. There's like dozens of those.
Black Hawk Down was about one helicopter going down. Okay,
right. I mean, just the way that the final sequence is constructed, where you basically have this massive mothership with this dynamite in it, and then all these little tiny ships going up against these kind of organic creatures, which are extremely colorful compared to the gray, brown drabness of the military machines.
The sequence that always makes me cry, among many sequences that make me cry in this movie, but one of the moments that always makes me cry is when the panther thing lowers its head and invites her to step on. It's like, it gets me, man. It gets me. Like that I don't know. There's something really powerful about that.
I think that's the thing is like on a raw, visceral level, the movie is just really entertaining. Now, we have already pointed out during this review, a lot of the storytelling stuff is pretty rough. Taruk,
in the moment, you're like, okay, sure, fine, great.
The biggest one, I would say the biggest kind of flaw in the storytelling for me is the idea that Taruk Makto, like where he needs to ride the biggest thing. It's like, hey, the way I figure, nobody's going to try to get on this thing from above. Oh, I'm sure nobody ever thought of that. Sully.
It is a thing that I never noticed until this watching of the movie is
because
like
you're hearing David Devindra's voice in your head and how they might criticize it, right?
I was constantly like, oh crap, please don't have to defend. I have to defend him against that and against that. But the it's weird that happens off camera, off screen. It's like it's weird that the most pivotal thing he does is we just sort of yada.
You see him jump on from first person perspective.
That's cool.
And
but you figure like maybe somebody's tried that before, and it would be one of the things that potentially could have defended against the thing. Well, white guy can do it. Nobody else has thought of it before. Is if there had been some thing that he learned that nobody had ever learned before, or there was some secret that had been discovered somehow that allowed him to do the thing that nobody else has been. But it's literally just like, I'll try it this way.
Yeah, it's pretty silly. I mean, and the thing that's another reason it's so jarring is because the scene where he first rides the Ikran is incredible.
Incredible.
And I actually didn't even remember that scene of them climbing up the mountains, but it's just like, wow, they're like thousands of feet in the sky, and they're just like, if they slip, they'll die. And like they go up to where all the Ikran are, and he has to like wrestle the thing into the ground. And
the leap onto the ropes part is just like
it's mind blowing. It's mind blowing. And then so he goes to all this trouble to like bring this thing into submission. And the idea that Taruk Makta, Taruk, the biggest one, you could just plop, just gotta
like
plop right on there. Like it's just like.
Yeah.
okay, I
A lot of the
guess.
shots, but just a reminder that Cameron, it does scale like nobody else. Like the sense of scale you get even from the beginning of the movie, like when he's walking into the base and everything,
Yeah.
the 3D really honestly helps make those spaces feel enormous. So
Totally.
that is,
And
yeah.
there's scenes where like especially with the Misty Mountains, right, where they're like you see like these tiny figures like walking along this massive like vine, and
Yeah.
it just is, it looks amazing. It's just
I
like
I
wow, yeah.
love the scene at the beginning when he's coming out of the thing in his wheelchair, and that giant truck passes, and you have that awesome shot
Yeah.
below him looking up, looking past him up at this massive truck. So cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But
dude,
yeah,
even like, I mean, the first few moments of the movie, I talked about that water droplet thing, but then as he comes out of the cryo chamber and you just see down the whole row of cryo chambers,
Amazing. Yeah.
and the guys are floating and asking if they're okay, and like, it's like such incredible imagery just right away, you know?
I kind of wish they did the like director's cut of Avatar back in theaters, because we get more stuff on Earth in that one. Apparently, I never ended up watching it, but I hear there's a bigger Earth introduction. Yeah.
well, guys, speaking of the Mandela effect, which occurred, a conversation earlier on the podcast, there has been significant online debate over whether the Jake and Neytiri sex scene in the movie features them connecting their ponytails,
Right.
And in fact,
It does
as we
not.
saw in the theatrical version, it does not.
At
Now,
least this version doesn't.
there was a scene that was filmed and made it into the extended edition that does have that, but it was never in the theatrical version. But a lot of people think they saw it in the theatrical version. They didn't. It was not. So
Sure.
we're clearing that up right now. I'm glad that we can be
The
a
one
resource.
takeaway you must have from this episode.
I'm glad we can be a resource about this topic.
Yes.
Anyway, yes. So the final sequence again. Just want to mention, right? Yes, Devindra, I agree with you. Sute kind of being on board with Jake's plan so quickly. It's kind of like I guess.
Really feel for Sute.
I mean, he showed like that was another thing that kind of bothered me about the narrative was like he kind of shows up on the Turuk at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and then everyone's just like everything's forgiven.
Yeah.
Everything's forgiven. Like I guess it's that big of a deal that you're on the Turuk that like we can ignore all the ways in which you have dishonored our society in the past.
We should have seen everybody like saying like, I bet he went up, right? I was thinking about going up one day.
I also have anybody thought about his Ikran, who's like, I will be devoted to you for life. You will ride only me, and I will only be ridden by you. And then he's like, oh, Tarak Mukhtar, bitches. And his Ikran's like, I'll be over here.
Yeah. But anyway, all that said, the ending sequence is incredible. It takes place in multi stages, right? There's they kind of like sort of start losing, and like everything goes into slow motion, and Neytiri is hopeless, and then all of a sudden, Awa hears their prayers, and like the animals come and defend the land, and that's really thrilling and exciting. And then. So I'm like, this is already amazing, incredible action sequence. Jake freaking chucking grenades into helicopters and stuff.
So rad.
But then they have like a really lovely, like tense fight sequence with Jake's like pod at the end, right? Like Quaritch barely escapes his ship. He finds Jake's pod, and he's like, you're about to like wake up, or he says, and he's like trying to get Jake out of the pod while like Jake's avatar self is trying to stop Quaritch, and Neytiri is trying to like get out from under this thing that's on her leg basically the whole time. And it's just like, wow, what an amazing, like, nice personal way to end it, as opposed to ending with spectacle. It's just like a fight scene between three characters trying to stop this guy from breaking into this pod. It's really,
I
really
love
well
that
done.
the giant mech is literally just using a big ass Bowie knife.
Big
you
knife.
know?
Oh
big
yeah, he like had one like on his waist or whatever. I'm like, did they all come with that, or was it just Quaritch's like special version? Right?
So rad, dude. It's so awesome, and it's also sort of works on this level of he is in his suit that makes him bigger. Jake is in his suit that makes him bigger. Even Neytiri's on the thing that makes her bigger. It's like it's all.
Yeah. Do you think Neytiri, like they called the humans with avatars dreamwalkers, which is a cool concept of like they're not always in their bodies, but like, how do you think Neytiri figured out that it was Jake piloting that avatar body?
It kind of looks like him. Still
was
looks
that explained
I feel like
to her explicitly?
She went to Earth school and spoke
maybe
English. I'm sure that I don't think Sigourney Weaver, I don't think Grace Augustine was ever pretending to not be in, I think that was probably all very clear.
Mm-hmm,
I feel like, they would always be, real upfront.
And she kind of looked at it and it's like, oh, that's the thing Quaritch was trying to destroy. Like maybe, and then when he reaches in there and like crushes one of those pods, it's like,
so
holy and it's like just not the pod that has Jake in it. It's like, wow, like it's incredible.
One thing the movie doesn't really clear up is how does the dreaming into Na'vi work? Like the timing of it, right? Because
when do they actually sleep?
When do they actually sleep? Right? It seems like they're awake all night, basically.
Yeah.
And also, this must be the highest speed like 5G connection ever, right? That they're like beaming in all this, but whatever. It's a feature.
Travel interstellar. So at that point, I will accept any wireless communications. Yeah.
Well, two other things I want to bring up. One is I loved the moments. So you spend so much time with the Na'vi and Jake just as the Na'vi in the Na'vi world that you kind of forget at a certain point that they're 9 feet tall, and then at the end, I love that part where Sute lands in the back of the helicarrier thing and just starts chucking dudes, and you realize, oh yeah, he's 9 feet tall and badass. It's just they're just like little play things for him. That's such a cool reminder of the scale that we're working at.
And then later, when Neytiri like places her hand on Jake and vice versa, you also like see the size difference. It's amazing. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I caught this time, and maybe others have caught many times before, but I remember hearing, rumors about the sequels and how Sigourney Weaver was still going to be in them and had to hold her breath a whole lot. And I was like, the whole thing was like, oh no, but Grace Augustine dies in it. But there is a shot after they do the prayer to Awa of the tunneling, which we only ever get when we're going into our avatar. So the idea that maybe Sigourney, what?
Yeah. I said, good catch. Jeff.
Yeah, and I think that was a clear indication that she has transferred her consciousness fully into the avatar, and maybe it's just she hadn't woken up yet,
or has transferred it to Awa, and it can be transferred into an avatar later, probably.
Yeah.
The thing that's really blowing my mind is how is Quaritch going to be in the next movie? Because theoretically, he is in the next movie.
He got arrows to the chest, baby.
Maybe they did the kind of one of those ceremonies with Quaritch too afterwards, and they kind of transferred his consciousness. Well, we just didn't see it. Right?
That is another thing that I was like, there's a lot of people that died in the Battle of the Big Tree that maybe their own people. They probably would have tried to ask Awa to bring back first before the nice white folks. I don't know.
The folks were ostensibly responsible for all their deaths. Perhaps they would want to give
I'll get together and sing so you guys don't die. But it talks about half of our population.
Yeah. Well, anyway, any other thoughts on Avatar? I think it's a great time. I'm going to try to see it again if I can in the theater.
I honestly, I hope I have conveyed how joyous a feeling it was to see this again on a big screen. It was like, I really was like, I don't want this to end. I don't want this to end. It brought me back to 2009. I hadn't seen it in so long, and I was reminded of just all the texture and joy that's in, all the little things that are happening in the backs of the frame of all the flora and fauna, and there's just so much to sort of soak in, and to see it on such a huge screen in 3D again, it just, man, I highly recommend people revisit this movie if they
should re-release some of those environments like in VR, because
that'd be great.
You could actually be walking through Pandora, with some headset. So that would be.
I was really impressed by like the creation of Pandora and like the flora, the fauna, but also like the creatures and how they're all designed. I think basically the creative brief was what if Earth animals, but with an extra pair of legs? That seems to be like most
and
of,
lungs on their chest. That's basically
outside. But it's a rip-roaring piece of action filmmaking that I think still holds up both technologically and in terms of thrills to this day. Yeah. And despite my extremely serious reservations about the message it tries to send, it's a great time at the theater, and I hope I get to check it out again before we see Avatar: The Way of Water later this year. At the end of the day, it's pretty impressive that James Cameron made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.